Nancy Pelosi was asked back in December, so last year, whether Democrats should put impeachment talk back on the table for the president if they, in fact, take back the House in 2026. She suggested the president had not yet crossed a line that would trigger impeachment. Do you agree with her?
Well, as you know, I would be a juror in an impeachment trial,
yes.
So I don't generally give advice to the House on whether or not they should impeach. But listen, I have common sense. And so I know that this president has committed 10 times more impeachable offenses in his second term as he did in his first term. The House will make their own determination, but I don't think it's any secret that the president's level of corruption and illegality is nuclear grade in his second term compared to his first term.
Welcome back to Way Too Early, just after 5:30 here on the East Coast, 2:30 out west. I'm Ali Vitale, and that was Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, claiming President Trump has committed far more impeachable offenses so far in his second term in office than he did during his first. It comes as Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts is set to deliver a speech on the future of the Democratic Party at a National Press Club event this morning. Warren isn't running for president in 2028, but I can report that her plan is to try to influence the direction of the party ahead of this year's midterms and, of course, the 2028 presidential race. In her speech, with excerpts that just came online moments ago, she will warn Democrats that they shouldn't cozy up to wealthy elites during a time when the party is weighing who to embrace. Candidates who lean more economically populist or those with a moderate pro-business agenda attempting to lure maybe fed up Trump voters. Want to bring in now my colleague, MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. So having covered Warren for a very long time, this speech reads like something that is quintessentially her. But it comes at a moment where the party is really lacking a blueprint and a North Star for where it's going next. And so I wonder, as we look at Capitol Hill, who the leading players are that could craft this kind of a message. To me, it feels like Warren, Bernie Sanders, they're pretty singular beings in this party. And so her coming out and saying, OK, we need to eschew the elites like Elon Musk and Jamie Dimon, favorite targets for her. How does a party that is soul-searching receive a message like that?
Well, I think a lot of it is that the party that the message wants to accept, right? Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders are these stars among the progressive left. But there's, of course, this conversation right now that really came into clear focus after 2024 of, do we want to go down that path of the progressive left, or is it smart for us to stay in the moderate centrist middle of the party? Now, we know how these things typically work. You run to the left or the right for Republicans during the primary. You run to the center during the general election. Clearly, though, as we get up ahead of 2026, Democrats are trying to hone in on their messaging. Elizabeth Warren is trying to go out there and say, hey, the progressive way is the right way. This is going to win us seats on Capitol Hill. This is going to set the momentum and set the tone for 2028. That's her thought right there. But I would be interested to talk to somebody like maybe Chris Murphy, right, who's not totally centrist, but a little bit more centrist than them, or somebody like a Josh Gottheimer or someone on the Democratic centrist who say, we don't want to play games with the left. We want to stay in the middle. That's the best way to unite the party. So Warren right here trying to get in early as Democrats are trying to figure out the winning message ahead of 2026 and really looking forward to 2028. Will it be, will voters like that? Will they endear to it? We'll have to see. But she's certainly trying to get in there early and say, hey, I think this is the way to go.
Yeah, so we'll ultimately end up seeing what happens in that speech. I will be watching it closely when she begins around 10:30 this morning. I think the other piece of it, though, is she's someone who has always urged the party to wage the fight. Whatever the issue at the center of it is, it's worth being caught battling for it. And I think this is something that the party has weighed, especially when it comes to the issue of health care. That's how we ended up in that longest government shutdown ever, just at the end of last year. We now have a funding deadline coming up at the end of January. I have not heard Democrats as self-assured around shutting down the government again in the name of this issue, despite the fact that they do feel, by and large, especially with time having passed, that they did a good job of sort of resetting the issues table by forcing everyone to talk about health care.
I think that the microcosm of Democrats don't really know how they want to move forward in terms of what to fight for is this government funding battle, right? Remember last March, Chuck Schumer kind of flirted with this idea of a potential shutdown, and then he totally whiplashed a number of his colleagues when he voted for the government funding funding bill. That then kind of led to him pushing for that shutdown when we hit October because there was so much frustration among the base. Now we're seeing that conversation again of like, hey, we're coming up to this January 30th deadline. What should Democrats do? They're up in arms over what's happening in Minneapolis and Portland. Some are talking about maybe blocking DHS funding and making the shutdown fight over that. But the fact of the matter is they can't agree, right? And this is about a year and change now when we're talking about what to do in the moment of a government shutdown. It gets back to the fact that I think Democrats haven't really solidified a message. And rather than not solidifying a message, they haven't solidified a strategy of how do they take on the Trump administration? How do they rev up their base that is really, I think, languished after the losses of 2024? They're sort of getting back their mojo a little bit. But still, there were a lot of pieces to pick up after those crushing election losses. So it's also message, but it's also strategy. Once they figure out those two things, I think they'll be on steady footing. Bringing it back to Elizabeth Warren, again, she is trying to get into this battle and conversation early, set a flag in the middle of the field and say, this is how I think we should do it. Let's have a conversation about how others
As she often says, she has a plan for that. And it's definitely one when you look at the plans and the way that they actually translated into the Biden administration, progressive standard bearer, moderate standard bearer, whatever you say, she was able to influence a lot of the policies
100%.
around the Biden era. I will also say, though, as the party gets its mojo back, as you say, specifically around the November elections, I think many of them felt buoyed by that. There's also the way that they have tried to stay away from the impeachment question to take us back to where we started with Chris Murphy.
Fascinating.
It's a word that is sort of like taboo to say around Democrats. And yet there are these moments where you've got Robin Kelly saying she wants to impeach Kristi Noem over what happened in Minnesota. You've had other inflection points where I have asked specifically members in the national security space, okay, if you're coming on and telling me that Hegseth and Rubio are lying to you about Venezuela, what is the recourse? And they're loath to say impeachment.
Yeah. It's just this like hyperactive word within political circles and in Washington. So right now, Democrats are sort of in the space, and really it's a boon for Hakeem Jeffries, being in the minority, that he doesn't have to really adjudicate this question of impeachment, right? We've known, and it sort of skates under the radar up on Capitol Hill, but for months now we've seen Democrats introduced impeachment articles against President Trump, against his cabinet secretaries. You mentioned Kristi Noem. They don't go anywhere, right? Even if they try to force a vote on it, they're immediately tabled or referred, and we don't hear about it later on. Hakeem Jeffries hasn't really had to weigh in because it's never going to happen when they're a minority. But if history remains as it typically does and repeats itself, and Democrats are able to take control of the House come November, of course, the president's party in power typically loses seats in the first midterm election. It's a check on their first 2 years in office. Hakeem Jeffries is not going to be able to skirt that question, right? It could be a real idea. And of course, you know, the president will not be, or a cabinet official will not be removed by the Senate, likely, if it's controlled by Democrats. But you can certainly have impeachment in the House. When we get into that territory, we're going to see more of a robust debate because there are actually ramifications. Right now, though, I think that folks who need to weigh in, if it's going to actually happen, can skirt around it. But still, certainly, Democrats can't even agree on impeachment right now, and they're in the minority. So, yeah, it's another example of not having a message or a strategy.
And it's also clear to me from my conversations with sources that they don't want to go into a midterm year saying elect us because we're going to be the party of impeachment. That's definitely not the message right now. Instead, they want to be the party of issues, of affordability, of a check on a White House that has been brazen in its actions. It makes sense strategically, but it's difficult in the instances that Chris Murphy is talking about when more is happening in this second term that stretches the limits. We'll leave it there for now, but it's a conversation I think we're going to keep having. And that's now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Thank you.
Thanks, Allie.